Gravity and friction is the reason we can walk, run, stop, or land a trick. Or not. Friction is a force that exists when two surfaces rub up against each other. Friction occurs in the opposite direction of the motion of an object. So, as this book moves this way across the floor, the friction is acting in this direction. This force will slow the book down and eventually cause it to stop moving at all. In class, we addressed 3 different types of friction: sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. The first is sliding friction. This occurs when two surfaces rub up against each other. As this block of wood is dragged across the table, there's friction between them. The spring scale shows that there's about 0.3 newtons of frictional force between the surfaces. Now there are a couple of variables that can change the amount of friction between the surfaces. One factor is how hard the surfaces are pressing together. So if I add some weight to this block of wood, the amount of force it takes to move the block across the table has increased. Another factor is the surface itself. If the surface is rougher, the amount of friction increases too. See how much more force it takes to move this block across the grip tape on this skateboard. If we add weight to the block, the force needed to overcome the friction increases even more.
I won't say anything at all, so why don't you slide?
Keep on rolling, baby. You know what time it is.
Another type of friction is called rolling friction. Rolling friction occurs when one surface rolls over another. This type of friction still causes the moving object to slow down and eventually stop, like in sliding friction. However, the amount of friction between the surfaces is much less than in sliding friction. Look how the spring scale isn't even sensitive enough to register the amount of force needed to overcome the rolling friction that occurs between the table and the batteries and this block of wood. The third type of friction is called fluid friction. This type of friction occurs when a surface is in contact with a fluid. This block moves through the water with very little effort. But if the force pulling the object stops, the object slows down and eventually stops, just like with the other types of friction. Gravity. It's the force that keeps us on the ground whether we want to be or not. The law of universal gravitation states that a force of gravity acts between all objects in the universe. There's a gravitational pull between everything with mass. Things as small as 2 grains of salt or as big as 2 planets. They're attracted to each other. Here on Earth, gravity accelerates falling objects at 9.8 meters per second squared. If the only force acting on a falling object is gravity, it's said to be in free fall. So when these skydivers first jump out of the plane, they're moving slowly at first, but gravity accelerates them toward the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared. But there's another force acting on them too. Since they're moving through air, they're affected by air resistance. At first, the force of gravity is greater than the frictional force of the air resistance. As they continue to increase their velocity, there's more air resistance. At some point, the force of the air resistance will be balanced with the force of gravity pulling them down, and they will fall at a constant velocity. Gravity is what gives objects with mass weight. Weight is a measurement of the force of gravity. Gravity and friction are two of the most important forces in the universe, as far as we're concerned. They are what allow us to work and play. Without them, things might get pretty boring.
You're making a video, Daddy?
Sort of.